panel is going to focus on developing a business plan in the cannabis industry. I know from the questions of the last two panels, a lot of timely questions will come up during this panel, sure. I'd like to introduce Bob Lickwar of UHY LLP, who will be moderating this panel to join me on stage. Bob, do you want to come on up? Bob has more than 30 years of experience as a practicing CPA, working exclusively with private health business and owners to provide compliance services and sophisticated tax planning strategies. He has extensive experience dealing with tax authorities at both the federal and state levels. He develops tax favored and other retirement plans for clients and assists in developing tax-efficient succession transactions, including acquisitions and sales of business. Bob has also considerable expertise in the taxation of small businesses and their owners, specializing in many areas of domestic taxations, including real estate, multi-state businesses, and individual taxation. He's a nationally recognized presenter on various tax issues and a well-known discussion leader providing continuing education to tax professionals. Please join me in welcome Bob, who will introduce his panel. Bob?
Thanks for your time. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to say, the panelists have been great so far, but I think we saved the best for last, right? Operations and things that we're going to talk about today. Where's the young lady who really perked up with 100,000 a day? She had the Red Sox mask, right? Okay, that's you. All right, I got some news for you. Now, the 100,000 a day is probably gross, right? Because the thing you're going to have to worry about, I'm a tax guy. I don't know why they asked me to moderate panels as a tax guy, but Section 280, capital E of the code, which limits your deductions, all your marketing, some of your owner salaries, your marketing salaries, and sales personnel. So you got to be efficiently organized, take advantage to the extent you can, but the only thing you have is cost of goods sold, right? As broadly defined in regulations that have actually, believe it or not, been outdated, okay? This is how proficiently we work around here. Outdated regulations are used to prepare current tax returns. So that's what we do. And just before I introduce our panel, as Tom mentioned, I'm with UHY. And UHY, I'm very proud, has gotten into this space before most of the other accounting firms. Hey, the bottom line is, folks, these are small businesses, they're entrepreneurs, they need help, they need financial statements, they need to be in tax compliance. The last thing you want to do is have something that is, quote, illegal, and it is illegal at the federal level, but now you have a tax issue as well. So many of those ancillary services that have grown off, as our previous panel mentioned, UHY is filling in there. I'm very proud of us. Our team here in the Northeast supplements our team out in Michigan and our team in New York. A couple are here today. Julie Manteria is with us today. She's our marketing person. Stacey Farber, who does our test work, and my tax compadre, Neha, was unable to make it today, Neha Nathwani, but we'll probably see her at another event. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel for this morning, and we'll take them one at a time because everybody's going to have about 8 to 10 minutes. We want to make sure that we've left plenty of time for questions. So our first panelist of today, Andy, we're going to start with you. We should have organized so that I'm looking down the panel line, but I didn't. And Andrew Glassman from Pullman, Comley, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got involved in the cannabis space?
Sure. A lawyer who doesn't like to talk about themselves is in their own business, so absolutely. So my name is Andy Glassman. I've been a resident of Connecticut my whole life, except for law school. College, came back, and I've been practicing law in Hartford for 35 years. And I'm excited to be in this industry. The firm itself, Pullman & Comley, we have 9 practitioners in this business. Our introduction to the field, to the industry, was with the advent of medical marijuana. We were one of the first firms in Connecticut to represent the applicant in the original application process. We went through and helped to structure and influence the regulations based on practicality, based on what we were hearing from our client that they needed the regulations to do. And we developed an expertise. This goes back to 2012. We grew with that client. The client developed, was one of the first successful grow operations, one of the first 4 applicants that received their actual license. We helped them and assisted them in all regulatory aspects of that process. We continue to represent that company. We represent that company through a sale process, and we now represent the new owner of that entity here in Connecticut. we've represented dispensaries, and we now have been tracking very closely the regulations for rec here in the state of Connecticut. Our group ranges in services from real estate, tax advisory services, zoning, investment advisory services, structuring, and general compliance work.
Excellent, thanks. So we're going to start off today in talking about setting up the business, and we've gotten a number of calls and the process. What do I do? How do I set up the business? What should I be thinking about? What are the challenges and what are the solutions, and are there still some unresolved issues? So what's the obstacles in setting up the business, Ian?
Well, this industry is no different than any other industry. A startup in any industry is a complicated process or a tricky process. You really have to know what you're engaging in. You have to understand the industry that you're going into, the business talent that you bring to the table. Who are the people that are doing this business with you? Who are your investors? Who are the people that actually will manage and operate the facility for you? So you go through that whole process, and there are risks associated with any initiation of a business. You may pick the wrong people. We heard in the last panel how difficult it is to get it right the first time. You make mistakes on hiring. You make mistakes on who your partners are. You make mistakes in who you're taking equity from or who your investors will be. So you have operational risks, you have management risks, and you have industry risks. So if you take all of the basic issues associated with any startup, and then you overlay this particular industry, there are additional minefields. And I'm listening today to both panels. I was a little surprised at some of the information that I was hearing. And what I mean by that is a lack of specificity in the information that we're hearing, a lack of guidance from the state of Connecticut. And I'm not faulting the state of Connecticut, DCP, or the SEC. They're learning this process as they go. So as a result, there are no answers to a lot of the questions that people in the audience are asking. So what you need to do is, frankly, have somebody who has the experience in the industry to assist you. That's where we come in. But also people in the industry with experience who have done this before. You heard from Curaleaf that experience determines everything. The level of success, the level of profitability that you ultimately attain in the business. You make mistakes, you find more efficient ways to do things. You find better people who have more expertise and knowledge, who have developed a better system and a better approach of doing this type of business. In the cannabis-related industry in specific, what we're hearing is we need more information if you're thinking of how you're going to start up. What is the Section 149 process? When the state of Connecticut and SEC talk specifically about management and control, does that impact how investment dollars can come into your operation? For example, I've talked to clients that have consulted with us about the possibility of bringing in investment capital not in equity, but in debt or convertible debt. Well, if you propose that and you come in with your application early on, and the state of Connecticut says, well, no, if we look at investment dollars and we look at convertible debt or direct debt, and if that debt has a priority in payment, does the 65% SEA applicant really have a 65% interest in the profits of the company? That's an answer that the SEC really has to give us in order for people to really understand how to structure their business. There's some other interesting things going on right now, and as you listen to all of the meetings that the SEC is having, you're getting tidbits of information. One thing that I just learned is that there's going to be a restricted approach to the ability to develop micro-cultivation and dispensaries in the state of Connecticut, retail in the state of Connecticut. It's going to be specific to a population of 25 or greater. Well, a lot of people out there looking at communities right now that may not have 25,000 residents. So you're looking in the wrong communities. So this information that we don't have is going to present significant risk to people in their startup process. So I know the state is trying to get there as fast as they can. The individuals on the SEC are all volunteers. They didn't know about the industry before they volunteered for that process. So they're trying to understand the existing industry, understand how the industry is changing to rec, understanding what a businessman or business group is interested in understanding. So they're playing catch up, where a lot of you are already either in the industry, thinking about the industry, talking to your friends about the possibilities. And that in itself is going to be a significant risk to the success. And although one thing I will add, and I know we have other questions, I think there's risk in not being early. I guess I'm a contrarian. I think there's a risk in not being early in this industry, in any of the application processes. If you have a following early in the industry, that following will pay dividends down the road, because people who are buying supply from you or people you are doing business with, they're the people that you're going to gain trust with, and if you're trying to distribute product, your product will have a name in the industry before other people coming late in the industry will be able to establish themselves.
Yeah, and I think there's a risk too. I agree with you 120%. I was unknowledgeable, or had a lack of knowledge, because I never inhaled. But in any event, as far as raising capital, we talked a lot this morning about, this is the bank of mom and dad. The banks just aren't there. A couple of them are, but getting into it, they're walking really lightly. But even if you can get to a bank, we're talking about 13, 14, 15% interest rates. If someone says, I'd really like to get into the business, I want to get in under private equity, and all the panel can chime in on this, where do we find these people? I mean, how do we find out that someone's interested in investing? I mean, is it just on Facebook? Is there an ad posted somewhere? It seems like it's tough to find.
If you know people in the industry, there are people out there looking for the opportunity to invest. And but the distinction I will draw, some of them are SEA alternative investors. They are people that have family and friends that want to put together and the opportunity to have capital. And the other thing, a question was asked over here about if I don't have any money and I'm an SEA, a social equity applicant, and I can't write a check for the legal fees, the accounting fees, we're meeting with people and explaining to them that if you are an SEA, qualified SEA, you are a commodity right now in the state of Connecticut. There's an opportunity for you if you talk to the right people, if you know people who know people with capital, if you know some of the banks out there that are starting to talk about and examine the possibility of making some kind of capital available. And so, and plenty of SEA-oriented folks are perfectly happy to go out there and raise their own capital. So there's a real mix out there. I think the market is much broader than being portrayed right now.
Mm-hmm. How did you guys get started? Just briefly, maybe I'm jumping the question, but where did you raise the capital from? Friends and family was basically the place to go, or?
Well, I think Ulysses is the only guy that's in so far. So, I'm just like most of you, still on the sidelines waiting. But Ulysses, why don't you tell everybody how you got your start?
You're not on the sidelines. I'm saying on the sidelines. We're all in the game here. So my name is Ulysses Youngblood. I'm the co-founder of Major Bloom. We do operate in Massachusetts under the equity program. And capital raising is interesting in cannabis because you ask, how do you find people that are interested? Everyone's interested in cannabis, no question about it. I think the biggest thing is being able to find those real opportunities and being able to find those people who are genuine and honest, because just because someone has interest doesn't mean that this is the right person. Right. I think I basically said yes to every finance conversation in order to raise funds, but ultimately we were blessed enough to have a network between our family, friends, a local community to be able to get our place operational.
Excellent. And before we close up with Andy, we've gotten calls, how do we get started? We're going to make the application. What else needs to go into the application process? What are the other attachments? Do we need forecasts? Do we need a business plan? Is the state going to need that to approve the application?
Well, the first thing, our approach is let's meet and talk with clients and figure out with all the alternatives, all the avenues, a Section 149 application or an SCA, as an SCA applicant yourself or as a 35% owner in SCA, or if you're converting, what are the opportunities for joint ventures? Once you make that decision, you can put a business plan together. Until you understand the implications of each of these choices, there's no business plan to make because you don't have a vision. So focus, create a vision, and then put together a budget. What does it talk? I'm talking to clients right now. How much is an initial application going to cost me? And you can step this. So just getting into the lottery, for example, if that's how you decide to go, is a very minimal investment in. And that's all you should do. You should stop right there. So raise your $1,000 that you need to go ahead and pay for an application. Get your chip, see if it comes up, and then let's talk about how much it's going to cost you. And frankly, if you now hold an opportunity to sit with the DCP and SEC and then go through the process, all of a sudden that chip has become worth a lot of money, and you will have investors asking you if they can partner with you and come in. So develop your business plan, understand which of the application processes you're going to follow, which license you're seeking or licenses that you're seeking, and then build the forecast, build the, who are my consultants, who is my security company, what is my facility going to look like, what are the alternatives in facilities, how big a facility do I need? The same way you would draw up a business plan for any other business doing business in the United States. There's nothing special about the business plan.
Absolutely, but it's so important that, and a lot of the businesses that go in with the best of intentions often fail because they haven't accounted for those contingencies. We talked about, the panelist was talking about, for example, the generator this morning and a potential effect. So, all of those things are going to enter into it. Anything else, Andy, to add? And before we move on to Ulysses, anything I may not have asked that you want to point out to our
Yeah, one thing that was suggested, there was a question over here about, do you have a mentorship program as a lawyer or as a law firm? The answer is, we've been, since July, meeting for coffee with people who have an interest in simply talking about what they're thinking. Those meetings have been anywhere from Bridgeport to New Britain to Manchester to Enfield, New Haven, Stanford, and basically explaining what the law says. And I buy the coffee, frankly. It's like, so it's a bargain. It's cheaper than a reduced fee opportunity, but it's what you do as a lawyer if you like this industry and you want it to develop, and you want the right people thinking about it and people trying to educate themselves. And there's nothing better than to ask a lawyer to help educate you about what you think you want to do and how you go about this process. That's what this is. We're all here. I'm not getting paid to sit up here and explain to you all the rules and regulations, but I'm telling you that we have information to impart. Those of us who are serious about this industry want it to be successful. I came in 2012 to an industry that nobody knew if it would be successful in the state of Connecticut. My only goal was to see it succeed. And this is just an expansion of that approach. So happy to talk to anybody about what they may have on their mind and what they may need.
Thanks, Andy. Now a proper introduction, Ulysses, you get to do for yourself is to kind of three into the fire there. And the other thing, Andy said he likes coffee. We both have the grapefruit juice, just to make sure we don't switch them up there or whatever. So without further ado, would you give us, you have an interesting background story, I read it, but rather than me reading to everyone, tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome you.
I'm happy to be here with you all for sure. So my name is Ulysses Youngblood. As I mentioned before, I'm in the equity program, my business in the equity program in Massachusetts. Clap it up for that. Please. Of course, we commend the state for being the first to have an equity program in the state. So I won't rave about it. I will tell you that it's still extremely difficult no matter what designation it is. I see Patrick shaking his head. He knows the deal. We shared many stories of us starting our business and just being able to get to operations. So I will say that I am from Connecticut. I have a lot of love for the state. This is where I grew up. I ended up moving to Worcester, Massachusetts, straight out of high school. I went to Trumbull High School. Was born in Bridgeport. Lived in Bridgeport, Trumbull, New Haven. Where else did I live? Naugatuck. Basically when I went to college, I ended up getting in trouble for cannabis. This was before decriminalization. Now, that was in 06 or 07. I ended up getting kicked out of Assumption College. It's a couple pounds a year, I believe. But basically, after getting kicked out, I realized that cannabis was becoming decriminalized about a year after. So I've always kept my eye on it, partly because, to be honest with you, for me, it's all about the culture, right? I know this was an emerging industry, but there was a culture that existed way before the industry, right? So people say they've been in the industry for X amount of time. I like to think about the culture for X amount of time, right? Because this all comes from our driveways, our family and friends, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, that, we're all part of the culture of cannabis. So I like to believe that's who Major Bloom is and how we set ourselves apart. Basically after getting in trouble for cannabis, keeping an eye on the regulated industry. I ended up going to graduate school at Northeastern in Boston. Once I finished school, I was in a corporate career, doing really well for myself in the sales management role, and I knew that I wanted to get back into entrepreneurship. So once I graduated, I actually just read the regulations in Massachusetts, didn't really take anything of it, and it was like, okay, I need to introduce myself to people and go out there and network with people. So at that point, I ended up meeting some great people back in 2017. One person who is still my business partner, she's a lawyer, her name's Ulysses. I'm sure many of you know her in the crowd here. But basically, we've been teaming up together since then, and for us, we realized that as we partner together, we can really focus on what matters in the industry, especially as operators. And to be quite frank with you guys, it's important for equity businesses to have control of the supply chain. We can't be satisfied with delivery licenses or retail licenses. We have to be producers as well. So that's something that we're really keen on, is being vertically integrated in Worcester. We do have 3 different licenses there. Not all of them are fully active, but we do have a manufacturing license, which just got commenced operation, I think, Monday of last week. We have a retail license, which has been operating since August, early August. And then we have a delivery license, which we are actively working to get our cars and our vehicles on the road. So yeah, we're just excited to set new precedents and help out people who are also looking to do the same thing. And like I said, a lot of what we do is coming from a cultural perspective, coming from an equity perspective, because we know that we're underrepresented. So that's the motivation for me and my business for sure.
Excellent. So you went through a lot of hoops to get where you are. You faced a lot of obstacles. What were they, and how'd you beat them?
Ooh, the biggest obstacle, I would say, honestly, self-doubt is an obstacle. Partly because, kind of going back to what we were talking about before with finance, everyone has an opinion on cannabis. Whether it's them trying to get in the game or whether it's them trying to deter you from, taking the right steps forward. I think, because it's so unregulated, you do have people who are willing to have these conversations, are willing or saying that they want to put money in or they want to invest, but sometimes those investments or those conversations are lopsided. I think, when it comes to a traditional business, we talk about business planning and how important that is. There's nothing more important than customers. We all know this as business people. If we can start making customers, we can start making money, we can start raising funds. But we can't go out there and start selling weed, right? We're going to get arrested for that. So I think it is lopsided in terms of, people who have money, people who have the resources to do this, they have a leg up. I'll tell you, we were the 12th business in the city of Worcester to open. There's 12 of them dispensaries in Worcester, and we're playing catch up right now. That's a big obstacle. It's a huge obstacle. We're not making $100,000 a day. I'll be happy to see, 80 customers a day at this point. But I will say that, we think more long term, and we know that, like Patrick mentioned, it takes a lot longer than what people expect. So I think, one of the biggest things is that you have to have resiliency and perseverance. I know it's kind of touchy-feely to say it, but if you don't have the right mindset, get over your self-doubt, then you're going to be, on the sidelines, I guess.
Patience is a virtue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it seems that the process will probably go the same way in Connecticut, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
How did you know which business model was right? Did you have advisors? Did you just figure it out as you went along? How did you get there?
Jay-Z and Master P. And Nipsey Hussle. I'm not gonna lie. Does anyone know why I bring that up? Right? It's vertical integration. Honestly, vertical integration. I mean, they told us, in the 90s that how it's important to have, control of distribution. And, to understand the culture and make the correlation between that and what goes on in the cannabis industry, it's near and dear because no one's really out there talking about it, to be honest with you. So I think for us, we've always had the mindset that we do need to control production in order to reduce the disparities that exist in this market. So, I mean, the short answer of it is, just understanding culture and, economics, to be honest with you. So, for any equity business, people who follow on social medias or, anything like that with Major Bloom, I personally believe that vertical integration is going to help reduce the disparity. So that's the business model.
Is it kind of cutthroat out there in Worcester with 12 right in the general vicinity?
You know what's the best part about it is that it could be cutthroat, it could be for sure. People like to smile and and make it all chummy, but you got to be very strategic with partnerships. You know, I bring up Pat again. He's been such a great resource, right? But for someone like us, where I don't want to drop any names, you know, with some you know, basically people selling their licenses and getting these other multi-state operators on board. You know, you got to play nice in the sandbox. So I think it's great to take apart, you know, looking at organizations as a whole and really deal with people. And I think that certainly helps with, you know, competition and what the rest of the market looks like. Because if you deal with people on an individual level, then they're going to be able to provide resources for you. They're going to be able to provide information for you, rather than looking at an entity as a whole and be like, hey, this entity is not that great. I think it's really good to understand, like, deal with people, and that's going to help you, you know, basically get to the next level.
Excellent. And to wrap up, any last words of wisdom from the trenches for anybody who's getting involved? And I say the trenches lovingly because you're dealing with this every day.
Yeah, in the mud, in the deep end, for sure. I would say one of the biggest things is truth, operating with truth. I think, you know, as we talk about things taking a little bit longer than expected, I think for many people who want to get in the industry or want to get in the game, you know, for me, I was moonlighting for a very long time, and every day it was just about like doing little things, right? So, you know, you have a bigger picture, but it takes a lot of little steps to get there. So I remember like taking 5 minutes a day just to respond to emails or to network with people. That 5 minute turned into, you know, 3 hours. That 3 hours turns into a full-time job. Now it's 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week. So I think it's important to start small and then stick to your vision. And as long as you're passionate and true to yourself, then you'll be able to execute, no matter how long it takes, honestly. Time is, you know, it's a virtue, but, you know, it's pretty much an enigma. So as long as you don't quit, you know, that's all that matters.
Thanks, Ulysses. And it's going to take a while. I mean, as we get adapted, like Massachusetts did, there's no question it's going to take a while. So that's great advice, and thanks for joining the panel today. Our third panelist today is Gary Anderson, Director of Planning and Economic Development from the town of Manchester. Gary, if you'd like to tell them a little bit more, if you'd rather have me read it, I'm more than happy to do so. But I'd rather have the panelists elaborate a little bit.
I'll keep it nice and short, thank you. All right, thanks for having me this morning, appreciate it. Beautiful venue, and good to see everybody here. Gary Anderson, the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town of Manchester. If you're not familiar with Manchester, it's actually a small city of just about 60,000 east of the river here in the greater Hartford area. I've been doing what I do there for about 5 years. Previous to that, I was the Director of Planning for a town in Massachusetts, so this is actually like the second time I've kind of gone through this with Matt's doing it several years ago. And you know, I was just going to comment when you were talking about patience. I mean, so we're here in Connecticut in the land of steady habits, right? We're talking about cannabis businesses. So you know, we do make progress. It just takes some time. And I think you'll see that no matter what town you're working with or what town you're looking to work with to open a business, you'll see that you know, I think folks in Connecticut will come along, but it takes us you know, a god-awful amount of time at some point. You know, I think maybe it was like 10 years ago you couldn't buy alcohol on Sundays, you know, in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think we're making progress from that. But like I said, you know, depending on where you're looking at locating, you know, you're going to have different rules and regulations for different towns and cities in Connecticut. So, you know, we're all waiting on the state. We talked about the state earlier as well. There are going to be some things that are in the policies that the state puts forward that some of those rules and regulations are going to be dependent on. You're seeing cities and towns trying to get ahead of it right now. Somebody talked about moratoriums recently. A lot of cities and towns have passed moratoriums, essentially banning cannabis businesses for 9 to 12 months. Essentially just kind of wait and see what happens. I think those folks are probably going to be behind the curve and probably put themselves at a disadvantage, but there probably are some, you know, some small cities and towns in Connecticut where it might not make sense to have a cannabis business. So that's up to them. Luckily, you know, I work for a town that's pretty forward-thinking, and I feel happy and lucky to be able to do that. Manchester, over time, in terms of Connecticut, anyways, has been always thinking about what's next, and certainly we see this as a potential opportunity. When I say we, you know, people have different opinions. There's, you know, 60,000 people and different policymakers in town, but up to this point, there's been, you know, a general, I'd say, level of comfortability to regulate this business and to have these businesses in town. We see it as an opportunity generally. So, right now, we're in the process of drafting zoning regulations, which cities and towns that are going to allow these types of businesses are going to need to do. I'm hoping to have those to our Planning and Zoning Commission by December. We've also talked about it a little bit with them, just to get some preliminary feedback. And again, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have that kind of in my back pocket. I'm not a policymaker, so I need to have them behind me in order to do these things, and they're going to be the ones that eventually pass the regulations, pass the policy. So, we're working on that. The law is pretty specific about what cities and towns can regulate, and there's not much, honestly. You can regulate where they go, so what zoning districts each type of business is in. You can regulate a little bit about signage and maybe a couple other things, but other than that, there's not a lot. It's really about location. So actually, during the question and answer part, I'd love to hear from businesses in terms of, as cities and towns are looking to locate these and establish zoning districts for retail and micro cultivator locations, what's important to you in terms of location? Obviously, we want to be working with the market and not, allow these businesses places where the market doesn't want to go or business owners don't want to go. So I know there's a lot to still figure out, and certainty is something I know that's important to business owners. But like I said, just be patient and we'll get there. Thanks.
So no inside baseball information about what you may be thinking about, where there may be some additional requirements municipally that aren't there at the state level?
Well, like I said, I don't think there's not a lot, honestly, that cities and towns can do in terms of additional requirements if you look at the law.
Okay.
So really, it's about location, and it's about thinking about what pieces of property, what districts in town might make sense for certain uses. I mean, we have tons of retail in Manchester, so, do we allow cannabis business in all of those retail locations? Probably not, but, there are places where it probably makes sense more than other places. And then, we see cultivation as sort of an industrial use, especially if it's indoors, and we have, there's an industrial district. To me, that's not rocket science to just add that to the list of uses. One important thing I think about the law that people should know is that cities and towns are not allowed to, even if you regulate and have cannabis businesses, you're not allowed to allow them by right. So it still has to be a public hearing, a special permit, or a special exception, it's called in Manchester. So you have to go and talk about why this location is going to make sense. You have to convince the zoning commission or whatever board you're going in front of that a specific location is going to work for the specific type of businesses, and that's across the board. So I just want to give everybody a heads up there. There will be some kind of a land use process, and I encourage you to talk to your either town planner, director of planning, or zoning enforcement officer, or whoever that might be in the town that you're looking at early on.
So Manchester sounds like it's probably going to be business friendly in the cannabis space. And we have gotten this question a lot. If Manchester is friendly, do I really need a state license, or could I just open up a shop in Manchester? We got this question.
Yes, you need a license. In order to go through the process legally, you'll need a license. That's the first thing I said to people that have called me. And of course, as soon as the law was passed, people called that were interested, that maybe down in Massachusetts or other places. Hey, we want to be in Manchester. Hey, we have an idea. And I'm like, great. We'll work on the regulations. But just so you know, you got to win the lottery first. So that is something. Ulysses just mentioned to me that hours of operation, I believe, is another thing that can be regulated. The way that we're doing that is looking at, the way alcohol sales are regulated, which is a state requirement. I'm not sure if that will end up in the state policies or not, but we'll probably be in line somewhere with those. So. Yep, thank you for the question. It's likely that there will be separation distances. Those will vary by town. Does anybody recall whether that's in the law? Do you know? I don't recall or not.
I think they mentioned this morning from the state, both the SEC and DCP said, I believe, yes, there are distances from schools in certain other areas.
Sure. So if that's in the state law, then that'll be a minimum of 4 for every town and city. It's likely that you know, you're not going to be able to locate next to a school or a place of worship or all these other uses. Those distances are usually, I'd say, between 200 feet and 1,000 feet, depending on what the uses are, what town you're in. So you're not going to be able to open up a business right next to one of those uses, and those can be, I think, further defined by the towns. But, you know, again, if you're talking about an industrial zone or a retail location, there's still, you know, if towns are open and welcoming to these businesses, they're going to have to find places that, you know, to allow them, because otherwise you might as well just say, no, thank you.
Any pulse or any idea as to how many towns you think will eventually approve? I mean, if you had to make a random guess, just what you're hearing out there, Gary. I don't know, and I don't know if you are.
Yeah, I don't really have a guess in terms of numbers. I think a lot of the towns that have passed moratoriums will eventually like copy our regulations, you know, copy some of the early adopters regulations and say, hey, we wanted to see how this worked in this other town, and now, you know, we're fairly comfortable with it. So I think most towns that have any sort of you know, local commerce or to speak of, you know, any retail or industrial locations, which is most in Connecticut, I think, again, most will come along. I don't know how long that will take, though. So, but I know there's, you know, a good number of cities and towns right now that are doing what we're doing in terms of looking at regulations and trying to get in early as well.
Excellent. And we will we'll take questions afterwards. So thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think we'll leave enough time for everyone's questions. Last but certainly not least, Brian Vassar, Mr. Nice Guys. I mean, Major Bloom, Mr. Nice Guys. They mentioned this morning that it's all about the marketing and the production. There you have it. Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself, if you could.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Vassar, and I am the owner of Mr. Nice Guys. Does anybody know where we jacked that from? Mr. Nice Guy? You know it. Come on. Where?
I don't want to spoil that.
It's from Half Baked.
Is it a song or?
No, it's from Half Baked. Anyway, I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I was actually a teacher in the public school system for a time before that. And I knew that Connecticut's marijuana moment was going to be coming in at hand, and I wanted to get as vertically integrated as possible. So what I did is I started, you know, years ago, a supply store for all the growers. So we sell all your nutrients, your lights, fertilizers, and of course we'll do consulting for those of you that are beginning this journey into marijuana. And you know, it's like, so you want to start a marijuana business, you want to start cultivating cannabis. There's a lot to it. It's not just as simple as dropping a bean in the dirt and off you go. There are plenty of tertiary responsibilities. I've had, I actually started, I was the 32nd person licensed in the state to assist with medical cultivation with their plant, and I came through the whole come up with them in the beginning and saw the struggles firsthand on what was working, what wasn't working, what challenges were made. I mean, I remember times in the beginning where we were literally taking grain alcohol and trying to remove any cannabinoids from the waste product at the end. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's about $200 worth of liquor for $20 worth of garbage that we're throwing out right there. And you know, some of the things that you have to do as you're moving through this process are challenging. You're grinding up stuff. In the beginning, didn't need to be done literally. I remember watching it in a mixing bowl and just wanting to cry as it was going down.
If you would use bourbon, I would have had to call the person.
Grapes, they'll put you in the grapes. So, you know, I have plenty of experience as far as cultivation. I work with a lot of the state's hemp growers right now, and of course the medical growers that have recently come to market right now. I found their way down to Mr. Nice Guys. And I would like to work with some of our other larger producers as far as sales and stuff like that. But, you know, I do the consulting for the small medical growers. That's for free to get them going. Larger scale, you know, we can talk about what the P's and Q's as far as that goes, but there are, you know, like I said, many aspects to this. And setting up this business and waiting has been a challenge. So, you know, I'm 10 years ago, here I am, you know, Colorado's been legalized, here comes Connecticut. 2010, 2011, I used to tell customers who come in, when are we going to start? I would say, you know, this year looks looking good. And then I stopped at 2016. I stopped. Everybody would ask me 2017. I tell them 2016. But here we are now. It's you know, it's upon us, and I'm happy to be a part and supply the industry that, you know, these cultivators that are going to be coming to Connecticut. I'm certainly here to help. And we are also, as far as the social equity candidates go, we're going to be offering a discount for them to, help ease some of these costs. And, of course, as far as vertical integration goes, I'm going to be pursuing one of these licenses and trying to, begin my own facility. For me, it's been tough. I'm like the Michael Jordan of cannabis cultivation, but I'm riding pine right now. 0 points per game, just, waiting. And it's difficult, but, I think my time on the court is coming.
We mentioned this morning on some of the other panels, Brian, about not wanting to touch the plant, and that would lead to the ancillary services. What do you think are maybe the top 5 or 6 ancillary services?
I can tell you one from my experience is one of the most laboratory testing is going to be one of the big ancillary services that everybody's going to need, and that's a major cost. So make sure you have that inside of your business plans as you're going. Packaging, marketing. Okay, these are things again. You want to drop a bean in the dirt and go. Consulting, obviously, for when you have your first problem inside your grow room. Nothing goes exactly to plan, and the best laid plans of mice and men. You start with an idea, and Patrick said he's changed 4 times as he's going to be working with Mr. Nice Guy's going to do twice. But there's a lot of extra services that, and back to the packaging one. How it costs. How much is it going to cost for a little tube to shove up pre-rolls in? How much is labeling going to cost to put on these things? What are the labeling requirements that are going to have to go on that? That's stuff that you're going to have to unpack as you move through the business.
Yeah, I think you raised some really great points, and I think it's really important from professionals. We have attorneys, accountants, et cetera, everyone, and other professionals here today. I mean, we're dealing with small business owners in a very complex regulatory area. You have the federal government on one side saying class 1. You have the states legalizing. There's really a tension there. So I would say that that's the most important reason to engage people who are performing other services. Would you agree or expand on that?
Oh, absolutely. You want to stay on the light side of the force. There's definitely the dark side is out there. There's no doubt about that. But staying on the right side of the lines, and that's been one of the hard things. As I said, I've certainly had the skills where to enter into the illicit market would have been no problem. I probably could have made tons and tons of hay that way. But doing things the right way, making sure you're on the right pages, these are in compliant with these multitude of regulatory agencies. It's a challenge, but you want to make sure that you're sleeping well at night. I don't think you're going to anyway. If you've started any kind of business, I've started and sold multiple businesses as I've gone. There's no easy way through it. You have to find, you have to fight. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So, kudos to everybody who is going to, grab the mantle, accept the challenge, and I hope to see everybody at the finish line. I hope I'm at the finish line. I hope I'm helping you get to the finish line. But, let's see how it all turns out at the end.
Do you think there's going to be a vacuum, maybe 1 or 2 service areas that are just going to be missed, and people here in Connecticut are going to see? I mean, and maybe Ulysses can expand to Massachusetts where, oh boy, we didn't think of this thing, and all of a sudden there's not enough people to service that ancillary portion. Do you see that happening here? And if so, what might it be? And
so from a pure speculative standpoint, I think we'll have our fill of retail stores. I think that's where, we heard the $100,000 a day number floating around there. I think everybody's going to be chasing after that. I think the real hay transportation license. I think that is probably going to be your lowest margin to enter, and your highest amount of profitability. So I feel like it's not the sexiest thing though. I'm a cannabis delivery driver. It doesn't hold as much water as a cannabis producer. And what I mentioned before with the packaging and marketing, these places are available across the nation as the markets have sprung up, but we're developing in Connecticut. I know from the hemp industry, it was a challenge to get that kind of stuff off the ground and running.
Yeah, and what have you seen, Ulysses? What was the vacuum that kind of got sucked out and needed to be filled when you started?
Yeah. Going back to the questions of challenges, for our business and any business in this industry, and thinking about, what's your name here? Thinking about Gary talking about special permitting. We also have construction permits, and construction is going to be your biggest cost for any license, whether it's cultivation, whether it's retail. I mentioned, being blessed with the network. If it wasn't for a friend of mine that I played college football with, who was a construction guy and basically just knew the qualms in this business, we wouldn't have been able to get our business funded. because we can get through licensing, as I mentioned before, with the great partner that I have, having experience in getting licensing and special permitting, but when it comes times to raise the money, it's going to be for construction. HVAC is very expensive for cultivation. We know that. So I would say, if you know construction people, architects, engineers, this is an opportunity for them for sure.
Yeah, there's a whole umbrella of tertiary services, construction and build out and just layout as far as engineering, working with a strong engineering firm like EDM right over here. They're going to help you to get these plans in motion. Working with local inspectors as you're having these build outs take place, you want to make sure that's all set. And even lighting layout stuff that Mr. Nice guys will help you with. Your lighting layout, your HVAC, how much humidification are you going to need? How much airflow are you supposed to have? Not every space is equal, okay? Some spaces are going to be, in underground. Some spaces are going to be in old industrial places. Some will be in greenhouses, and each one of these areas is going to provide a unique challenge, and you need to have the right players involved to help bring these to life.
Absolutely, great. Thanks, you guys. It's a great panel, great opportunity. I want to open it up for the rest of our time for questions, so we'll have a question right in front here.
So growing up in Connecticut, I know Manchester has always been a city that isn't as receiving for students. And if they are, a lot of times you have to live in Manchester to be able to have a business. My question is, as far as this is concerned, if I wanted to open up a lounge, not living in Manchester, would I be able to have that same opportunity as somebody living in Manchester, or should I have to?
Well, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I'd love to hear it offline what your experience was. But no, anybody can open a business in Manchester. You don't have to live there. The one interesting thing that you said about the lounge, though, I don't know that the law contemplates that type of use. So you want to make sure that that's something that you can do. But no, to answer your basic question, no, we have business owners from all over the state that operate in Manchester. We'd love to have more.
I see a gigantic vacuum opening up there, snacks at the lounge. That's what I see. We need snacks. Another question. Yeah.
How you doing? My question is for Gary as well. I was born and raised in Manchester. Currently own a business with my wife in Manchester. We're actually going to be speaking on 12/1 at a public hearing for a variance that we're applying for currently out there for our business. But that aside, so you mentioned some of the space that is available currently in Manchester. So a discrepancy or a disconnect as I see it currently in terms of how the social equity laws are currently written is that those businesses have to fall within some of those blue zones. So I know you have space available, say on Providence Drive, that could be a good location, but I don't see that as falling within that blue zone. Now, regardless if a cultivation facility goes in the blue zone or somewhere else within your town, that money still goes back to the town. So I'm wondering if there's any opportunity for you guys to connect with the council and get them to expand it to whatever town contains blue zones.
Sure, so I think we're talking about two different things. So the blue zones deal with this, whether you're eligible for social equity. So if you're from one of those areas, then you're eligible for the social equity lottery. This is my understanding again. But that doesn't have anything to do with where you can open a business. Unless somebody corrects me if I'm wrong. What will guide where you can open a business is
misinterpreted. I apologize.
Right. No, it's okay, and it's good for everybody to know. What will guide where you can open a business is the zoning in that town. So those two things are not connected again, unless somebody knows something that I don't.
Can I clarify a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's an application called under section 149. So if you meet the social equity requirements, you can go ahead and apply without going through the lottery for an application to be a cultivator. You can only put that cultivation facility in a DIA, the disproportionately impacted area, which are those tracts. So that's a state law. The local authorities will not be able to impact that decision.
I'm a little confused about that. So it does have to fall within those 215 blue
Yes,
zones?
yes. So, and that's a way to skip the line. You can always put another facility in a different section if the community allows that as part of their local zoning requirements.
So if we
Through the
If
lottery.
we pay the $3 million, avoid the lottery, obtain a cultivation license, that cultivation facility has to fall within one of those 215 blue zones.
Only if you meet all of the criteria of that application process, which includes being a qualified social equity applicant. Yes, and then you have to put it in that disproportionately impacted area.
I just want to clarify. So you're saying right now that if you're a social equity applicant and you skip the line, then it has to be inside that blue zone that we're talking about. If you're a social equity applicant and you go into the lottery, you may go to wherever the
As
municipality
a
is.
lottery applicant, and you want to approach your community and say, I'd really like to put it in this zone, it has nothing to do with the census tract at all. It has to do with what the town.
So only if you're a social equity applicant and you're going in lieu of the lottery process. Okay. But there are social equity applicants that are in the lottery process as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I hope that cleared that up for you. Because I didn't clear. I heard her speak to that earlier, and I was a little confused myself. So.
I think.
Good question.
Well, I got a microphone over here if it's okay. Can I go? So the question is, I'm in the utility industry, and the whole concept of the people talking at the Connecticut Power Energy Society and whatnot is dead on. I used to work in the data center space, and they would put 10 megawatt data center someplace, and all of a sudden they expect the utility to show up on day one with a big extension cord. It doesn't work that way. It's expensive. It takes up to 2 years sometimes. And grow houses have a similar small footprint, but a large energy consumption. And is there a quality control element of the application process to validate that you're getting somebody who knows what the heck they're doing? And the reason I ask that question is, or is it simply the Willy Wonka lottery, right? I put my application in, the quality of the business plan doesn't count, but if I get the license, then all the good people will come to me and I'll figure it out. Now, I'm asking you specifically to the grow house component, but is there a quality control on either bucket, the SEC or the general, for any of those licenses? Or is it simply you throw an application, you get it, and then you hope to figure it out afterwards?
I think that probably would have been a better question for our first panel. I feel like those would have been the guys from the DCP.
I tried.
Yeah,
I didn't get my
more apt to answer that question for me. Yeah, and I don't believe that there is a quality control. They said they're going to interview and stuff like that, but somebody who is highly qualified, you're not guaranteed anything. It is a crapshoot. So you put your name in for the license, you hold your breath, and you hope you get it, as far as I know.
Could I add?
Andrew, did you agree with that?
Well, if you go back to 2012, the application process was based on an RFP.
Right.
And you competed head-to-head with other people, and you were qualified, you were rank order, and the first 4 grow facilities became the license holders.
Right.
Curaleaf went through that process. The application process there was extremely rigorous. We submitted on behalf of our client an application which was 1,200 pages long, which had every detail about every aspect of the facility that we were proposing to be built out. If they didn't like that, they could have rejected the application. They didn't. They rank ordered it as one of the top 5, I think, and they picked the top 4. If you look at the current statutes, it doesn't say anything about that. And in fact, it suggests to you, it implies to you, if you know how to read the statute and compare it to what was done previously, that it's based on getting picked from the lottery, number 1, presented and being qualified if you're a SEA or a non-SEA, then going through a 14-month provisional process. And it appears to be that provisional process is where you will present to the state of Connecticut. Now you're back at DCP, which will evaluate you the process. They have said in numerous public forums that it will not be as rigorous a process. We want people to succeed and be licensed. So I think the answer is it remains to be seen. And that's when I suggested to you that one of the risks of doing this is not having enough guidance out there. This is one of the elements of, okay, so what do I have to have in place if I get picked at the lottery and I start through that 14-month provisional process? And certainly you have to have things locked in. You have to have somewhat of a commitment for facility space because you're not going to run around. In 14 months, you may not get your permits.
So, but you don't need that prior to the application and the lottery.
Well, I think you need to, at a minimum, someone suggested letters of intent, having an option on space, for example. having an understanding of the cost and your budget, and do you have the capital associated with that build out of that space, then you can start putting the details in place. You can negotiate your contracts, you can lock up the sites, you can go to a zoning hearing, but it shouldn't be the first time you go to a zoning enforcement officer is the day you get your lottery number. You should go beforehand and say, hey, if I have this application, and if I'm successful, I'm looking at this site, does this meet all the requirements that your town will impose on me? Because I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to be in a hurry to get that thing locked up so that I get my license approved. Because then you're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on costs associated with that process.
Thank you.
Also, to speak to that, we all have, high aspirations for the cannabis business and stuff. Not everybody is going to succeed, unfortunately. That's just the reality of it. It's going to come down to how good is your plan? How many accessory partners do you have in place? What are your margins for what you're growing? What is your marketing plan to get the stuff out? Because growing is one thing, getting it to the market is another. And there's a ticking time bomb on it. You can't just sit on the stuff indefinitely. It doesn't stay in that stage for a while, but it does not stay indefinitely. So, you don't want stuff to pile up. You want to be able to move things efficiently. And, ultimately the market will decide winners and losers. Now, granted, there is a large amount of funding that can keep not successful business afloat for a while, but eventually, it's going to go through. So, make sure those plans are tight as you move through the process.
No, I saw you pick up your mic, so I thought you made that. Okay, no problem. Next question. Oh, fire when ready.
Okay, no problem. My name is Devin Schleight. One question, or let me just make a comment real quick. The blue zones that we were just speaking about in regards to where the social equity folks can be, I've gotten clarification, at least from the Social Equity Council, that they don't have to physically be in those locations. And the reason why I asked that question is because I also work with the Norwich Community Development Corporation, and we have a bunch of warehouses that are not in that area. So it made it, I needed that clarification, and so that's the clarification I got. I'm just letting you know that's, what I got from the council. The question I really have is actually for Ulysses, and it's in regards to, and this might sound simple, but how did you pick the city that you wanted to go to, and what can cities do to attract folks just like you?
Thank you for the question. And I would say, I held my heart because it came from heart. I got my ass beat by the Worcester police not too long ago. So that was the motivation after I got kicked out of school. I was living in Worcester. I got my apartment raided. And they came and, there's a little gang initiation. So for me, it's subtle, but, Worcester's the second biggest city in New England. And, essentially, I own a home there. So I basically had an opportunity to work with the city, folks like Gary, showing up as a resident, as a constituent, as opposed to, the businessman, basically, right? So I had an opportunity to meet people before they were in their office in the morning and say, hey, how's my application going? You know what I mean? And I think that's extremely important for cannabis, is to be local and intentional. So having been to college in Worcester, having been beat up by the police, having owned my home, I have 2 boys, my wife teaches in the city. I show up as a community member, as a constituent, as opposed to a business person. Because to be honest with you, the profits stay in the community. When my kids growing up there, they're going to reap the benefits, as opposed to the 12 other multi-state operators that are in the same city. So again, I think it's very important to be intentional and local.
I also think being first, if you're one of the first municipalities to come forward and say, we're going to allow a cultivation or a micro-cultivation facility in this area right here, I think you'll see that people will be beating your doors down. That's all, there's going to be a lot of deliberating, but act quickly, act decisively, and of course tax credits or tax rebates for the growers would certainly help speed that along as well, I'm sure. Of course, we do want to kick back into the communities that we are a part of. That is an integral part of it. But especially in the beginning stages, to be as accommodating as possible would be very palatable.
Hi, one thing we haven't heard about is the security aspects of this industry, because I'm guessing there's a lot of theft and the potential for nefarious activities.
It's a misconception. It's a misconception. In fact, it helps. Going back to the question we had about why we chose Worcester, we're in the hood in Worcester. I don't know if any of you guys know where Millbury Street is, but it's a notoriously, a lot of crime for alcoholism, heroin addiction, prostitution, all that stuff. So we chose that area because it is a disproportionate impacted area, and in fact, what we're doing is bringing a high level of security to help remediate a lot of that stuff. One of the first weeks we were in, the cops called us looking for some footage because someone got stabbed across the street in the parking lot. So I think it's a common misconception that there's a lot of crime associated with cannabis. I think there is on the unregulated side of things, but with us and the requirements that the state have for security, it actually enhances the property values and security in the neighborhood.
So you can also check on the DCP's website, all the regulations for exactly specifically what you're going to need as far as security is available. They did put those regulations out. I think you're going to be more apt for internal theft than from people. And again, to me, scale is everything. Having a smaller grow for me with people that I know and trust that I can keep in there, that's extremely valuable. Knowing who you're working with, knowing who you can trust is invaluable at that point. So again, who's coming in? What steps are you going to have to take inside of there? I know there's, as far as some of the medical growers, there's drastic steps that are taken inside, and you're never going to eliminate it though. That's, there's always going to be little mice nibbling at little parts and stuff like that. When you have it, you have to deal with it swiftly and move on. But as far as the actual regulations and stuff, you can check that out. That's right there. Any extra layers you can certainly add on to. And I remember I was at a town hall meeting where somebody was trying to put a dispensary in town, and some of the people in town had the same concerns you did. What all crime's going to go up and stuff like that. I had to stand up and say, excuse me, there's a lot more valuable product at the CVS pharmacy that's right up the road. So if you're looking to make a quick hit, there's less security there than is at any cannabis facility. I can assure you of that. There's you can go to any drive-through CVS and you're literally a hand reach in to get into these cultivation facilities. You'd be surprised what it takes to get in and out of one of those. They're bulletproof glass, retina scanners, the whole 9 yards.
Hi, I'm wondering if anyone can speak to some of the employment challenges that you guys face in the industry. For example, when you're paying employees, you have withholding and all that kind of stuff. Do your employees face any risk?
From a tax perspective, the answer is no. The income is taxable. I'm sure, Ulysses, you probably use the payroll service to handle everything. Yeah, so I don't see any legal issue there. Andy, is there other legal issues to worry about?
Well, technically, there are a lot of legal issues. The fact that's why I only play one on.
Isn't there always?
I have a lawyer. Lawyers always find legal issues. But the reality is, everything you're doing in this industry is illegal federally, no matter what level of the process you're in. Whether I'm advising a client, whether you're an accountant, and if the federal government, Department of Justice, wanted to make trouble for you, they could. That would include employees, that would include owners, that would include service providers, but it's been made very, very clear by a lot of the advisories that are out there, with the exception of the last administration, for a very short period of time, that the Department of Justice will not be prosecuting those people at this present time. If you got a different administration in there, they could take a different view of the whole process. But this is, as we said, there's a lot of momentum right now behind making this nationally, state by state, but nationally acceptable, and leaving those states alone that have what they say are rigorous regulation behind the enforcement of drug laws, the management of the product, and if it starts getting into the wrong hands, they could come in and enforce.
Let me add to that real quick, just because I gotta throw my 2 cents coming from an economic perspective. I think the biggest issue with employment is representation of Black and brown people in the industry. I spent a lot of time visiting a lot of facilities, and when it comes times to seeing people that look like me, I know that I'm underrepresented. So not only on the ownership side, but it is data that the state of Massachusetts basically tracks, and I think it behooves Connecticut to do the same. And data doesn't lie. I mean, we can look at it and see that arrest rates are much higher for Black and brown people. So where's the employment opportunities? Where's the ownership opportunity? And we have to hold people accountable for that. So that's my biggest thing with employment. Obviously, for us, we don't have too much of an issue for that, just because we kind of attract that. Obviously being a black male, but I will say for a lot of the entities in the industry, that is the biggest issue.
Do they raise that issue, Ulysses, when you hire them? Do people in general who you're hiring raise the issue of, I don't know if I really want to do this because I'm getting into an industry that's potentially a time bomb. All due respect what Andy says.
No, we hire traditional weed smokers at my salon. So people just love to be around weed, and that's what keeps us going for sure.
Excellent, thank you. One more, okay, and can you go?
Have you gotten from anybody that's delegated to want to, where they've gotten to promote you at DEA or something, or they're worried about, more back to
You mean people who are actually in the industry that are worried about it being followed? I have not heard of that happening. I think that it's been true to, as I described earlier, there were a lot of professionals that did not get into this business early because of that concern. We just happen to have been not one of them.
One more back.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jesse Mejia, and I'm doing my research on opportunity zones. I want to ask you if you see the possibility of blending to be a job creator while leveraging the cannabis industry and selecting a site that is an opportunity zone.
Federal opportunity zone?
Correct.
Yeah, those are specifically going to be excluded under section 1400Z because, 1400L, because they excluded package stores and other types of businesses that were selling controlled substances. So as long as we have a controlled substance issue, opportunity zones aren't going to apply. Now, maybe there's some issues with real estate and landlords, but I don't know. I think it's possible. Andy?
I think anywhere you have any federal overlay,
Yeah.
on any programs, you're not going to be able to cite any of these facilities in this.
Correct.
Because people will worry about their sources of capital that come from the federal programs.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. Good. Huh? Thanks, everybody. And thanks, panel. Thank you.